Nobody in that room saw it coming. The press conference was supposed to be routine. A few questions about the recent road trip. Some comments about the upcoming schedule. The kind of obligatory media session that players attend hundreds of times throughout a career, showing up, saying the right things, walking out. Standard. Predictable. Forgettable. But the moment Freddie Freeman stepped to the microphone, something was different. You could feel it before a single word was spoken. The jaw was set differently. The eyes carried something that veteran reporters in that room recognized immediately, not fatigue, not frustration in the ordinary sense, but the specific, concentrated energy of a man who had made a decision. A man who had been holding something back for too long and had finally, quietly, chosen to stop. What followed was not a press conference. It was a detonation. Within minutes, the room had transformed from a routine media session into the most talked-about moment in the Dodgers organization in years. By the time Freeman walked away from that microphone, nothing inside the Los Angeles clubhouse would look the same. Manager Dave Roberts was blindsided. Chairman Andrew Friedman was on his phone before Freeman had even left the building. And somewhere at the center of everything, as he so often is, was Shohei Ohtani. This is the story of what happened. How it started. Why Freeman finally snapped. And what the emergency phone call late that night means for the future of the most scrutinized roster in baseball. To understand why Freeman reacted the way he did, you have to go back to the moment that started all of this. Manager Dave Roberts had made comments, public comments, delivered in a media setting, that touched on Ohtani's performance and approach in a way that crossed a line. The precise wording mattered less than the context. In baseball, there is an unwritten but universally understood code about how you handle internal matters. You keep them internal. You protect your players publicly. You save the difficult conversations for the clubhouse, for the manager's office, for the spaces where accountability can happen without becoming theater. Roberts crossed that line. Whether it was fatigue, whether it was pressure from above, whether it was a calculated decision to send a public message, the why almost doesn't matter. What matters is the effect. Because in a clubhouse as tightly constructed as the Dodgers, with personalities as strong as the ones on that roster, public criticism of a teammate is not a neutral act. It is a grenade. And Freddie Freeman was the one who picked it up. Sources close to the situation described the atmosphere inside the Dodgers clubhouse in the hours following Roberts' comments as heavy. Players were aware. Conversations were happening in corners, in hallways, in the spaces where the cameras don't reach. The general sentiment, according to those familiar with the internal dynamics, was one of discomfort, a feeling that something had been done that couldn't be undone, and that someone was eventually going to respond to it. Nobody anticipated that the response would come as publicly and as forcefully as it did. Freeman arrived at the press conference looking composed. That composure, it turned out, was not calm. It was control, and there is a significant difference between the two. The first few questions were handled normally. Reporters asked about the team's recent performances. Freeman answered. Brief, professional, measured. Anyone watching from the outside would have seen nothing unusual. Then came the question about Roberts' comments. The room shifted. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras refocused. And Freeman, rather than deflecting, rather than giving the diplomatic non-answer that these situations almost always produce, took a breath and went straight at it. He did not use careful language. He did not hide behind qualifications. He spoke directly and without apology about what Roberts had said, about what it meant to the players in that clubhouse, and about what the standard of leadership inside a championship organization should look like. He spoke about loyalty. He spoke about what it means to stand behind your players when the outside world is already doing enough criticizing on its own. And then, and this is the moment that made the room go completely silent, he brought Ohtani into it directly. Freeman made clear that the criticism directed at Ohtani was not only unfair but counterproductive. That Ohtani's commitment to this team, his preparation, his professionalism, and the standard he sets every single day inside that facility demanded a different kind of public response from the manager, not criticism, but protection. He spoke with the authority of a man who has been in championship clubhouses, who has won at the highest level, and who understands what tears teams apart from the inside. By the time he finished, the room was not just silent. It was stunned. Reporters exchanged glances. Cameras kept rolling. And somewhere in the building, someone was already reaching for a phone. This moment did not come from nowhere. And to reduce it to simply Freeman losing his temper would be to completely misread what actually happened. Freddie Freeman is not a player who acts impulsively. His reputation across multiple organizations, across a career that has spanned more than a decade at the highest level of the sport, is built on exactly the opposite quality. He is measured. He is professional. He is the kind of veteran presence that younger players gravitate toward precisely because he handles pressure without breaking. Which is exactly why what happened at that press conference was so significant. When a player of Freeman's character and experience makes the decision to publicly push back against his own manager, in front of cameras, on the record, with full awareness of the consequences, it is not a moment of weakness. It is a moment of conviction. He calculated the cost. He understood what it would mean. And he did it anyway. The reason is loyalty. Freeman and Ohtani share something that goes beyond being teammates. They share a standard. Both of them represent a certain philosophy about how the game should be played, with intensity, with preparation, with respect for the people around you and for the game itself. Freeman has watched Ohtani up close. He has seen the early arrivals and the late stays. He has seen the film study and the batting cage work and the quiet, consistent excellence that doesn't always make the highlight reels but forms the foundation of everything that does. When Roberts criticized Ohtani publicly, Freeman didn't just hear criticism of a teammate. He heard criticism of a standard he personally respects. And for Freeman, that was worth the risk. The response from the manager's side was notable primarily for what it wasn't. There was no immediate public counter. There was no press release walking back the original comments. There was no visible attempt to get in front of the story before it became the story. Instead, there was silence, and in the world of professional sports media, silence is never actually silent. It says something. What it says, in this case, is that Roberts was caught off guard in a way that suggests the fracture between him and at least a portion of his clubhouse runs deeper than this single incident. Managing Shohei Ohtani is unlike managing any other player in baseball. The scrutiny is different. The expectations are different. The global media attention creates a pressure environment that has no real precedent in the sport's modern era. Every decision Roberts makes regarding Ohtani, lineup position, rest days, workload management, public statements, is analyzed at a level that most managers never experience in an entire career. That pressure, over time, can produce exactly the kind of miscalculation that Roberts made. A comment that might have seemed minor in a different context, about a different player, became a flashpoint because of who Ohtani is and what he means, not just to the Dodgers organization but to the broader baseball world watching from every time zone. The fracture is real. The question is whether it can be managed, or whether what happened at that press conference has made management significantly more complicated. Andrew Friedman did not wait until morning. The call went out late that night, after the press conference footage had already been clipped, shared, and dissected across every major sports platform. Friedman is not a chairman who operates emotionally. He is analytical, deliberate, and deeply aware of the value of information before action. But this situation did not allow for the luxury of a measured overnight response. What was at stake was not just one press conference or one player's comments. What was at stake was the internal coherence of a roster that was built, at enormous financial and organizational cost, around the premise that chemistry and talent could coexist at the highest possible level. The Dodgers championship window is defined in large part by Ohtani's presence. Everything from marketing to broadcast deals to the expectations that ownership and the fanbase carry into every season runs through number 17. When public conflict emerges, real conflict, the kind that plays out in front of cameras and gets replayed on loop, it threatens something that no amount of talent can fully compensate for. Friedman's call was about damage control. But it was also about something more fundamental, a recalibration. A conversation about how this organization communicates internally versus externally. About the standards of public messaging when you have a player of Ohtani's stature on your roster. About what accountability looks like at this level and whether the current structure is positioned to handle the unique pressures that come with it. Those conversations are not easy. They are not short. And they do not happen at midnight unless something has gone genuinely, seriously wrong. Shohei Ohtani did not attend the press conference. He did not make a public statement. He did not respond to the controversy in any visible way. This, too, is completely consistent with who he is. Ohtani does not engage with noise. He has demonstrated this repeatedly, through contract negotiations, through international media pressure, through the relentless global scrutiny that follows his every move. He processes things internally, consults the people he trusts, and then returns his focus to the only place he believes it actually belongs, preparation and performance. But make no mistake. What Freeman did at that press conference mattered to Ohtani. Not because he needed defending, he doesn't, and he knows it, but because the act of defense itself communicates something about the culture around him. It tells him that the people in that clubhouse are paying attention. That his standard is recognized. That the investment he makes every single day is seen. For a player of Ohtani's caliber, that kind of environment is not a luxury. It is a necessity. The greatest players in any sport perform best when they trust the people around them. When that trust is undermined, by public criticism from management, by visible internal conflict, it creates friction that eventually shows up somewhere. Freeman understood that. Friedman understands that. And now, following an emergency call that went deep into the night, Roberts will have to understand it too. Here is what gets lost in the immediate drama of a moment like this. Freeman's outburst, if you can even call it that, because it was too controlled and too deliberate to be a genuine outburst, was not just about one comment from one manager on one day. It was the visible surface of something that had been building. Pressure accumulated over time, inside a clubhouse carrying the weight of championship expectations, with a media environment that turns every internal dynamic into public spectacle. The real question is not whether Freeman was right or wrong to say what he said. The real question is what the Dodgers organization does with the information his words contain. Because Freeman didn't just defend Ohtani. He sent a message to everyone paying attention, to management, to ownership, to the baseball world watching from the outside, about what the standard inside that clubhouse needs to be. He named it publicly, at personal cost, because he believed it mattered enough to name. Whether Friedman's emergency call results in real structural change, or whether it produces only the kind of surface-level piece that holds together temporarily before the next flashpoint, will say everything about what kind of organization the Dodgers truly are when tested from the inside. The press conference is over. The cameras have moved on to the next story. The clips are still circulating. But inside the Dodgers organization, something has shifted. A line was crossed publicly, and then another line was crossed in response. And late at night, in a phone call that nobody outside that conversation will ever fully hear, the shape of what comes next was being decided. Freddie Freeman walked away from that microphone knowing exactly what he had done. The only question left is whether it worked.